SCP-610 Lima 6. Contact was re-established with the team members who fell into the underground river currents 5 hours after the events of SCP-610 Lima 5. The majority of contact consisted of video and audio transmitted from the team's onboard recording devices. It is unclear whether the team members were aware they were still transmitting, as they made no active efforts to communicate with command before falling out of range. Analysis of the footage indicates that 9 of the 13 missing team members survived their initial fall into the river, as the remaining 4 do not appear in any available footage. The footage begins with team members struggling to stay afloat as they travel down the river current, video commonly being obscured by impact with rocks and water on the lens. Several team members can be seen hastily removing their masks as they begin to fill with water. Cries of alarm and distress can be heard, but are distorted by volume and proximity to the microphone. Despite the turbulent nature of the currents, the majority of the team appear to be keeping their heads above water, bar one, who is floating face down. As they continue to struggle against the water, the colour of the water around them visibly changes to a dark red. This is theorised to be runoff from SCP-610 infected individuals elsewhere in the cavern. A flesh-textured covering begins to appear on the walls of the cavern. Agent Hamilton begins to vomit, likely from the turbulence, though the red water immediately enters his mouth and he slips beneath the water. Another unidentified agent, believed to be Agent Thompson, attempts to call out to request assistance for Agent Hamilton, but the red water enters her mouth. She then sinks beneath the water as well. Ahead of them, the feed shows them approaching a sudden drop. Bye-bye, Mike. He is being dragged away by the IKEA staff, introducing The Maze of Shelves, an amazing upcoming graphic novel featuring SCP-3008, The Endless IKEA. It's made its way into a comic book at last, and you can own it yourselves. Not only that, but 100 special editions of the novel will feature my own unique cover featuring poor old Mike getting dragged away to yet another gruesome demise. But there are only 100 on offer, so get them while you can. Once they're gone, they're gone. This isn't a copy and paste of the SCP article, this is his own custom story and it's fully illustrated, just look at these drawings. So if you would like your own SCP-3008 graphic novel and want to get your own Mike special edition, you need to follow my link now, support the Kickstarter, and pre-order your Maze of Shelves comic book today. The camera of Agent Kim captures images of a waterfall of some kind downriver. The remaining 7 agents begin to struggle against the current with more effort. This does not appear to be successful, as all 7 camera feeds briefly show chaotic footage, and all 7 appear to fall from about 20 meters into a shallow pool beneath the waterfall. Agent Kipling manages to stand up and views the remains of his team, including Agents Thompson, Hamilton, and the original unidentified face-down agent. It appears that Agent Kipling and Agent Kim are the only survivors of the fall, though both individuals' movements indicate severe injury. Agent Kipling does not appear to notice that Agent Kim, who is face down on the other side of the shallow pool, is alive. As he is facing the ground during this time, Agent Kim's camera does not record anything of note for almost 3 hours. Agent Kipling does not seem to notice that several of the dead agents are twitching, though they appear to have suffered enough injury to have died. He moves to the nearby shore and sits down to rest. The shore is made of the same stretched red material that covers the cave walls. He leans back and lays his head on the floor of the cave. Agent Kipling does not move for approximately 3 hours. His onboard recording continues during this time. Several entities that appear to be made of flesh appear above him. They surround him, but do not disturb him. After a few minutes, they move out of frame. Above Agent Kipling, several entities of unknown origin crawl across the ceiling of the cave. After a few minutes, these entities hurry out of frame. Afterwards, the flesh covering the ceiling begins to peel back. An eye approximately 10 meters across is uncovered and begins to search the cavern. After another 6 seconds of moving, the eye appears to notice Agent Kipling. The eye continues to focus on Agent Kipling for over an hour before closing again. Agent Kipling recovers and sits up. The bodies of his fallen companions are no longer visible. Agent Kipling holds his head in his hands for several minutes. He then stands up and discards his webbing and empty holster. He also partially unzips his suit and lowers the hood. Agent Kipling then begins to move up an inclined rock face covered in flesh located behind him. It should be noted that while generally similar, the layout of the cave has changed noticeably while Kipling rested. Agent Kim begins to roll over as Kipling's movements become audible. Agent Kipling begins to speak.
This is Agent Arnold Kipling of MTS-610-5. I've lost all but one of my team. I don't see how we're going to get out of here, but might as well keep good records of what happened. The flesh has taken over everything down here. It's like I'm inside a living creature. Can't get over the feeling that I've been eaten and it's waiting to digest me later. Either way, I'm going to keep going.
Agent Kim begins to stand as well, though his movements appear more sluggish and laboured. Agent Kim then also discards his waterlogged gear and lowers his hood.
We gotta get out of here.
Agent Kipling crests the incline next to the river and sees what looks like a small village in the distance. This village, like the rest of the cavern, appears to be made of flesh, though the building materials have textures that resembles actual brick and wood. They also pulse periodically. In some places, veins and arteries appear to connect the surrounding flesh to the village's buildings. Agent Kipling looks back down the incline to Agent Kim.
Kim, you have your sidearm?
Negative, sir. Horse was empty when I came to. Must have lost it in the tumble through the river.
Damn convenient. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure I wouldn't put one in both our heads and call it a day, mate. Fuck. Looks like we're fine with sticks and stones then. Of which there are neither down here. There's a village up here. It's flesh covered like the rest.
Agent Kipling assists Agent Kim in ascending the incline. Both agents walk towards the village. During this time, though Agent Kipling appears to not notice it, several flesh entities are seen moving in the periphery of their front-facing camera's vision. Each seems to be making a concerted effort to follow the agents but remain hidden while doing so. One entity merges into the floor briefly when Agent Kipling turns in its direction, then re-emerges when Kipling turns away.
Sounds like we just woke something up.
Or it was always awake and now it's got something to hunt.
Fuck, we're fucking dead.
Calm down. Look, I want to apologize. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry. Someone should be sorry for this. I got everyone killed.
Agent Kim does not respond, and the two continue towards the village. Agent Kipling reaches the outskirts of the village and noticeable movement is spotted entering and exiting the flesh-covered buildings.
Hello? Who are you?
A voice vaguely resembling Agent Kipling's responds from an unidentified location.
I got everyone killed.
Agent Kipling stops walking and responds.
What do you want?
The voice responds again using a warped version of Kipling's voice. Agent Kipling turns around and begins to look for Agent Kim, who is no longer visible in the area around Kipling. Audio from Agent Kim's radio is recorded through Kipling's suit. The sound of laboured breathing and quiet cursing is heard, then a muffled scream. Agent Kipling deactivates the receiver on his radio but keeps his broadcast on. The camera of Agent Kim's suit recorded the agent's eventual fate. While Kipling was walking forward, a tendril of flesh dropped down from the high ceiling and wrapped around Agent Kim's head. He was dragged rapidly into the air and through an opening in the ceiling before Kipling was able to turn around. A number of tooth-like extrusions surrounded the ceiling opening while it was consuming Agent Kim. Once Agent Kim entered the mouth, his head was freed from the tendril covering and he was able to breathe again. He called out twice for Agent Kipling, who had already turned off his radio and moved forward. Agent Kim begins to scream as several of the tooth-like extrusions begin to pierce both his suit and body. The 610 infection does not appear to spread from the areas around the breached suit, and the vitals monitors indicate only severe blunt force trauma, more piercing of his suit, and blood loss. However, despite losing a lethal volume of blood, Agent Kim does not die. During this time, his vitals indicate extreme stress, including a severely elevated heart rate. What, if anything, is allowing his heart to continue to function during this process is unknown. Regardless, the surrounding environment becomes more and more hostile to life. The pH level of the chamber falls to heavily acidic fairly quickly. Eventually, the vital monitors installed in Agent Kim's suit fail, as does the camera. After 16 hours, the audio recording equipment in the suit fails as well. Except for incoherent screams of pain, Agent Kim does not vocalize anything of note during this time. As this is occurring, Agent Kipling walks towards the chapel at the center of the village. Shrieks and snarls follow behind him, but Agent Kipling either doesn't hear them or doesn't respond. He reaches the chapel and opens the door. The interior of the chapel is much larger than the outside dimensions would indicate. Agent Kipling turns to the exit, but finds the door behind him is now just a blank flesh wall. He looks forward and sees his team members with various amounts of damage to their suit and bodies, all, with the exception of Agent Kim, are hanging from flesh tendrils that are wrapped around their necks. Agent Kipling appears to focus on Agent Hamilton, whose sidearm is still in its holster. Agent Kipling runs forward and takes the pistol from the holster. He checks the gun for ammunition. After confirming it is functional, he holds it in front of him and backs away from the hanging bodies.
What do you want?
There is no response for several minutes. Agent Kipling attempts to move against the back wall of the chapel, but the wall moves away from him as he does so. Kipling attempts to approach the bodies again and finds that he cannot make any progress in that direction either. Agent Kipling's warped voice echoes seemingly from the entire chapel interior.
It's waiting. Well, okay then.
Agent Kipling's vitals monitor register a severe uptake in heart rate and blood pressure at this point. Suddenly, the entire room begins to shrink inwards towards Agent Kipling. He attempts to move but faces the same difficulty as before. The bodies of his team members are snatched up and out of the camera's field of vision. The room constricts from approximately 60 meters across to just over a meter across over the course of a few seconds. The rapid change in air pressure forces Agent Kipling off his feet. The pressure sensors on his environmental suit register dangerous levels of blunt force trauma, and Agent Kipling appears to go limp. The room has constricted to a circular diameter just large enough to hold Agent Kipling, who is being slowly squeezed downwards, similar to the function of an esophagus. Agent Kipling remains conscious for another 78 seconds, breathing heavily and struggling against the muscles pushing him further down the tube. Agent Kipling's vital monitor indicates he eventually stops breathing during this process. He passes out at the end of this period. He is then deposited into a similar small chamber as Agent Kim. Kipling is revived when his suit is pierced similarly by teeth-like protrusions. As he screams in pain, he takes Agent Hamilton's pistol and places it to his head, pulling the trigger. Agent Kipling is briefly knocked unconscious by the force of the impact. Though it should not be medically possible, he regains consciousness almost immediately and begins to cry. His camera records the remainder of his digestion. The camera eventually fails, but Kipling's radio broadcasts his sobs and screams during this process for a short while before also failing. All the agents lost to the river systems are declared killed in action. Unknown audio file.
This is a nightmare. I know what you're thinking. The infection of land and people is a tragedy, but a manageable one. We keep a perimeter, we use our flamethrowers, and the problem is contained. And hey, who cares since it's in a low population area? I used to think the same. But this report is troubling for more than one reason. We've been concerned about the underground caverns for a while now. I believe the slow progress of the infection on the surface and the methods we use to control and contain it are masking the real problem beneath. The explorations of 610's underground structures are truly terrifying for many reasons, but the entity, whatever it is, played with its food. The level of intelligence it showed in its predation of Agents Kim and Kipling was remarkable. I've begun to suspect that the deeper into infection we venture, the smarter the entity. But that belies the other troubling implication. What has me slowly going mad is the extent to which the infection seems to go. Agent Kipling was almost 4 kilometers underground when that thing finally decided to eat him. The Oblast is in a fairly isolated location, and we've been careful to contain the infection. But I'm told we've had smaller breaches and infections begin in other locations. The breaches in other parts of Russia are under control and relatively small. But the breach in Mongolia is another matter entirely. We were unprepared for this breach, and only came in several weeks after infection was already underway. This infection site was 700 kilometers away from any other breach. That's the same distance as between Boston and Washington, D.C. What does this mean for us? The infection runs extremely deep. and also appears to surface in fairly distant locations. If we take these two pieces of data and correlate them, we run into an inescapable conclusion. The infection runs extremely deep underground. The surface infections are just a minor symptom of a bigger problem. At first, I found this confusing. After all, the spread of infection to non-organic material is only observed in the presence of an end-stage infected human. But if that's the case, how are large swathes of underground cave systems fully infected? Then it struck me that an intelligent entity would know where to place any infected living creatures to maximize the conversion of inorganic matter. It's also wholly possible that the behaviors we see on the surface are simply rudimentary, and the controlling entity is more capable nearer the source. So, I authorized various seismic surroundings in areas still under our control in South Siberia. They're useful to determine the density of the Earth, and can often tell how deep the crust is in any particular location. The entirety of south-central Russia is, under the surface, flesh. 95% of Mongolia is also flesh, and 16% of China is flesh. Our estimates indicate that up to 4% of the entire Earth's mass has already been converted. We're not just talking about crust, this goes down into the mantle. Additionally, this infection is growing exponentially. As more material is infected and converted, it exposes yet again more material to infection. The larger the area, the more infected material is touched by non-infected material, and so on. Current models indicate that the entire Earth will be converted in approximately 31 months. Of course, the problem will become untenable long before that. We suspect within 6 months, maybe 7 if we're lucky, southeastern China will be infected. The high population density there will make containment impossible. Air travel will likely allow transport of infected individuals worldwide. 2 months after that, and all of India will be infected. Regardless of if we manage to contain the infection in China, after that there's little point in trying to predict anything, as I imagine by then we will have long since lost control of the situation. It's not all terrifying oblivion though. I genuinely believe that there is an intelligence directing this infection. If it's intelligent, it can be reasoned with. If it cannot be reasoned with, it can be killed. This is what we need to do. I've authorized a new mission. It will be utilizing the best in both anomalous and non-anomalous protections to bring at least one human into contact with what we believe is the current core of the SCP-610 entity. If we can convince it to stop, then we will. If it is mindless or uncooperative, then we will move to stage 2. It's not important how we got it, but we've obtained at least one anomalous device from Dr. Wondertainment, which should be capable of obliterating the entire underground complex. After that, we carpet bomb the surface with nuclear bombs. This is a last-ditch effort. If it succeeds, the death toll will be unimaginable. Hundreds of millions dead. And I cannot imagine converting 4% of the Earth into an empty void will be great for those of us living on it. The alternative is too grim. I can live with a massive crater visible from space in Central Asia. If we fail, then no one gets to see anything at all. Ever. If we are successful in either case, I imagine at some future point someone will be hearing this and wondering if there was a better solution. Maybe there was. I don't know. I fully expect to be put in front of some international tribunal for this in a year's time. In the meantime, you're welcome, because you're alive to hear it. Remember, we die in the dark, so you can live in the light.
Check out this video for another great story, and please leave a like and subscribe if you made it this far, it really helps the channel. Thank you Sumerian for writing this one, big up the patrons, and special thanks to Viger, Zahex and Andre Bechert.